Donna Leigh Perfect, welcome to Over the Bonnet.
Thank you very much for having me here in Gympie. I'm very excited about being on your podcast today.
Thanks for being here. Now, you've written a bunch of books. What are they all about?
Well, yes, I have. I've written a children's series, and the children's series is about my daughter and our rescue dog, Rocky Rockstar. So the adventures of Jessie and Rocky Rockstar. And they're books about Rocky teaching Jess about kindness and compassion, life lessons.
What sort of life lessons?
Oh, lessons about being kind to animals, about being kind to each other, and being honest and being authentic, I guess, yeah. So just everyday life lessons.
What's the response been from the kids?
The kids love the books and they love Rocky Rockstar. So I started a channel which was the reading on the couch with Rocky Rockstar, and this is also on my free life-saving app. And so I started to read children's stories, famous children's stories from all over the world, like We're Going on a Bear Hunt and The Very Hungry Caterpillar. So those really favourite stories that kids know and recognise. And Rocky was sitting on the couch next to me, and this was actually during the first lockdown in Australia. And there was just so much excitement around getting to know Rocky and then knowing that, hey, he's part of a children's series of his own.
What does your daughter think about it all?
Mixed. Being a teenager, at the beginning she was pretty excited, but, being a teenager, I guess, being part of a children's series is not that cool, So, yeah, there were mixed feelings around that. I think she was excited to know that it was going to be a legacy long term for her and a beautiful memory for her and her rescue dog, because she's very close to Rocky. But it's probably not a really cool thing for a 17-year-old to be part of, to be honest.
So when you did it, what was the process that you went through when you wrote? It's
really interesting, actually, because I had a challenge put to me by my husband. So he is an international comedian, and his entertainer friend put a challenge to him. Hey, let's write some books together, and it can be something that we can sell on the cruise ships when we are travelling. And he said, so what we're going to do is we're going to be accountable to each other, and every week we're going to check in and make sure that we're each writing a chapter. And then my husband called out to me, Donna, are you into this challenge too? And I thought, oh yeah, I'm always up for a challenge, right? So I thought, yeah, I'm into it. But I had no idea what I was going to write about. And I actually thought it was probably going to be my story. And then overnight, this idea of writing a children's series about my daughter and our rescue dog just came to me. It was just channeled to me. And I've heard this before from other authors where these ideas just kind of come, out of nowhere. And that was pretty much what happened. So the first book is Puppy Rescue, and it sort of started the series about how Rocky Rockstar came into our life.
What can kids learn from it?
They learn about being kind, especially to animals, making sure that, if you find a dog, a rescue dog, that you check them out with a vet, and you make sure that they're not owned by a previous owner, they don't have microchips, all that kind of thing. So you're making sure that, that the dog is not, owned by a family already. So these are the sort of things. And learning about how to care for a dog, what sort of food to feed it, and and then this dog is teaching Jess about being kind to animals on the beach, like snakes, for instance. So there's a lot of lessons in this book that, are really amazing.
You say you're married to a comedian. What's it like? Is he always funny?
No. No, he's not. And in fact, I was married to a comedian. Our marriage broke up on January the 1st, 2020. But no, he wasn't always funny. And, in fact, quite often you find that comedians have mental health issues. And he certainly, had his share of problems. But, he was an incredibly talented comedian. In fact, he was the stuntman and warm-up crowd guy for the Police Academy stunt show at Movie World on the Gold Coast for 16 years. So that was what he was famous for, and an incredibly talented artist.
I remember Gary McDonald is Norman Gunston, his alter ego, and he had terrible mental health issues which he hid behind his alter ego.
Yes.
Do you find that from what you've had to do with your husband and other comedians that, a lot of them do hide behind that persona?
Yes, absolutely. And, I think the need for dopamine is really their own internal need. And so to get out on the stage and make people laugh is really what is missing in their own life. And so to need more of that on the stage is really filling their own void.
Do we do that to escape, though? Do most people look to make others laugh to escape their own problems, do you think?
Oh, look, yes, often that's the case for sure. I mean, often our problems are an internal reflection, I believe, of what's going on inside us,
With this COVID problem that's been going, you talk about 2020, and it was a pretty hard year for a lot of people. Do you think a lot of people are hiding behind mental health issues that aren't recognised at the moment from what you've seen with your travels and speaking tours?
Yes, certainly. And in fact, I had my own challenges because not only did my marriage end just before COVID, but then all of my income was gone because I had speaking gigs, including Las Vegas, which were all cancelled because of COVID. So everything went into shutdown. So I had to pivot. I had to decide, well, what am I going to do to provide an income for myself and my daughter? And it was this funny kind of message that came to me actually one day, and it was just this message to give back to the community. And so I thought, now what skills do I have that I can offer the community right now who are suffering? A lot of them were suffering anxiety, mental health. They'd lost their jobs. Maybe they were having problems with their relationships. And in fact, we know from statistics that in some countries, domestic violence went up by 73%. We had suicide rates increasing and so forth. So it was a huge issue in the community. So I thought, what can I do to offer the community some way of raising, the happiness and improving mental health? And I thought, okay, well, I'm a personal trainer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to offer some happy home workouts in the mornings, every morning, on Facebook Live. So that's what I did for 3 weeks in the mornings. And I had my happy socks on, and I had families getting up, exercising to release those happy chemicals, endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine. And then I decided to do the Rocky Rockstar reading on the couch in the afternoon to children. While parents were really struggling with homeschooling and, they were on Zoom meetings, they were doing webinars for the first time, learning all these skills that they'd never known before because they'd go into the office and do their job. And now all of a sudden there was no office to go to, and they had to find a new way of communicating with their team. And so I thought, well, how can I entertain their children while they are home, having to deal with business?
How important is exercise in our whole physical well-being? You're a personal trainer, you're interacting with a lot of people, and COVID must have also affected that.
Absolutely. We've found that not only mental health and anxiety, but of course, people are eating too much. They're sitting on the couch. They have a sedentary lifestyle even more so than ever before, and especially with lockdown. Okay, so we weren't allowed to go outside. We weren't allowed to really interact, and so people were sitting on the couch. They were watching Netflix. They were drinking alcohol, and putting on weight. And of course, this affects everything. It affects our metabolism. It affects our mental health and everything. So exercise is critical to, speeding up our metabolism as we get older and improving our mental health. So it's really a perpetual cycle.
You were at one stage a Lifeline counsellor. How did you help people?
Well, that was an incredible experience. That was in Sydney, and I volunteered for 2 years on the phones, and that I learnt so much. I learnt so much about myself, and you learn about your own trigger points and what may affect you in the phone calls that come to you, and learning that you need to disconnect from the caller when you're speaking to them so that those trigger points, don't set your own emotions off. So I got a lot of suicide calls in those times, and they were the most challenging of all.
I was going to say, how do you handle them?
Yeah, well, there's quite a technique, and it's important that you're there for the caller, and you hope that the caller will make some kind of agreement with you that when they get to a point where they are almost ready to take their life, you want to make an agreement with them that they will call back. They will call the line back and speak to somebody, because we are there to support them. And at the end of the day, we can't be responsible for anybody's decision. It's everybody's choice what they choose to do in their life. But we want to be there to support them and show that there is love out there, and who is their network, who is their support network that they can reach out to on a daily basis, and start to set up a suicide plan, so that they can start to plan how they can protect themselves, how they can come out of this darkness and see some light in their life.
What toll does it take on those that are taking the calls at the Lifeline call centre when they're dealing with that real tragedy on a daily basis?
There's a debriefing. So we have a supervisor for any suicide call. As soon as we've had a suicide call, then we go into the debriefing room and we get to debrief with a supervisor. And generally, our shift will be over after that suicide call, because it takes a lot out of you, for sure.
Is it something that Lifeline callers will then need their own Lifeline calls? You know, like, I can just see that it'd really drag you down when you're trying to lift someone up. It's easier to pull someone down than it is to lift someone up. It must be incredibly difficult.
Yes, it's certainly challenging, but the Lifeline, family, I guess I call it, is just so incredibly supportive. And, they provide so much compassionate support for their callers and their volunteers. So there's a lot of support that's available, and they certainly don't leave you just to walk out of the studio and go home with all of that kind of on you. So there's a lot of support there, a lot of debriefing.
Now, you were talking before about your speaking engagement over in the States. How often are you over there speaking when you were doing it?
I was first in Las Vegas in 2019, and I was speaking at the inaugural Her Story Women's Global Empowerment Conference. So that was where women from all over the world were coming together to share their stories. And most of those stories were about overcoming adversity. There was a common thread with a lot of the stories around domestic violence, unfortunately. And it was held in Las Vegas in 2019. So I was really honoured to be a part of that. And I was also in the Volume 1 Her Story Women's Global Empowerment book. So that's where 10 women, an anthology series of 10 women from around the world, were sharing their stories.
For people that don't know what's special about your story, or what do you share about your story when you're talking?
Yes, so my story started when I was 7 years old. I came from a family of 5 siblings. I'm the youngest, and I'm a twin. I have a twin brother, and I was born in Auckland. And my life seemed to be pretty normal until the age of 7, when one morning I woke up to the piercing screams of my mum. And I jumped out of bed and I heard my father yelling as he chased my mum down the hallway with a knife. And I chased after him along with the rest of my siblings, and my mother, as she was trying to reach for the sliding door handle to escape, my father drove the knife deep into her back, and she stumbled along the side path to the front of the house and she took her last breath. So it was an incredibly devastating moment for me and my siblings. I then saw my father being taken away in the back of a police car, and we were shuffled off to my cousin's house down the road, and it was just the most surreal experience, because I remember sitting on the couch and hearing on the radio that a woman in Auckland and Avondale had been murdered, and I just couldn't believe that, wow, that's my mum they're talking about. And my life just changed forever from that moment.
Is that the first instance of domestic violence that you actually saw, or was it a continuing thing and it was just the last of a stream of events?
Look, I don't really recall any physical violence, to be honest. I remember lots of arguments, but nothing that escalated to that level. So it was it was shocking. It was really traumatic for me.
How do you look back at it now? How do you think it's affected your life?
Well, my trauma continued after that time because all of my siblings, including myself, were taken into foster homes. And in fact, I went to 13 foster homes, and most of those foster homes were abusive. So I experienced lots of emotional and physical abuse during those 6 years almost in foster homes. And I recall one particular foster home. It was the first one. I was 7 years old. The foster father was an alcoholic, and he asked me to run a bath for one of the little girls that was in the foster home. And to be honest, I had no idea how to run a bath. So I just turned on the hot water and I let it run. And then I turned off the hot water. The little girl climbed in and scalded herself. And the foster father went nuts, absolutely nuts. He took me into his room and he pulled his leather belt off his jeans and he pulled my pants down and he just belted into me until I bled. So that was my first experience in a foster home. And the last foster home that I was in, there was a very emotionally abusive woman that for some reason had it in for me. And there was a little girl, her name was Marama, a little baby actually, 6-month-old, that came to the foster home. And she came all by herself. And this foster mother said to me, I was 11 years old, almost 12, she said to me, Donna, this is your baby. And I had no idea how babies were born, so I believed her. And I had to look after this baby. So I had to change its nappies. I had to wake up and feed it. I had to look after it. And one day when I came home from school, some 4 months later, Marama was gone. And I went to the foster mum and I said, where's Marama? Where's my baby? And she said she's gone back to her mother. You won't see her again. And so I had to go through another kind of just being separated from somebody that I loved, and I really bonded with Marama so much. So that was the kind of abuse that went on in these foster homes. And then when I was 12 years old, the social welfare authorities came to the foster home and put a very difficult decision to me that a 12-year-old should never have to make. And that decision was either to stay in foster homes until I was 18 or to return to my father, who'd been released from prison. But the hardest part about that decision was to return back to the home where my mother was murdered. So back to the memories of that morning and to a home where I remembered Mum, but she was no longer there, and living with a schizophrenic, alcoholic murderer for 5.5 years.
Was he still an alcoholic at this stage?
He was an alcoholic. Every single day he was drinking himself, and he would sleep with a knife next to his bed every single night. So my brothers and I had like a survival plan while we were living with him, because we were walking on eggshells every single day. It was terrifying. It was a terrifying 5.5 years. And so we had muster stations where we all had our place to go if there was any violent outbreak.
What did the other kids think of your father after what had happened?
They hated him. Basically, there was a lot of hatred. He was pro-Nazi, and he believed in the Aryan race and Hitler, and he was just discriminating. So we had a lot of Maori and Pacific Island friends, and he was just just so awful to them. They weren't allowed in the house, and so it was a pretty awful time for me.
Should he have been allowed to have had the kids back? Had you all had all of his kids back? Should he have been allowed to look after you guys again then, considering what went on?
No, I don't believe so. I believe that was an injustice actually against us, and I don't think the social welfare really was taking our health and well-being in priority, to be honest.
What was their priority then?
What was their priority? Good question. I really don't know, but it certainly wasn't us. It didn't feel like it was us. And 25 years later, there's a huge compensation claim going on in New Zealand about the children in the social welfare system in New Zealand. And it took them some 6 years to investigate my particular file and come back with some compensation money. And the interesting thing about that compensation money is I put that money aside because I wanted that money to have a significant impact on children's lives, a positive impact moving forward. And I didn't know how that money was going to be spent, but I knew that it was going to make a positive difference to children. And the amazing thing about that is I put that money aside, and when I had these children's books channeled to me, The Adventures of Jessie and Rocky Rockstar, the cost of publishing those 2 books was almost exactly the amount, this compensation money that was paid out to me. So it was an incredible, just how the synergy worked.
How much did you get?
I got $20,000.
Is that enough?
No, I don't believe it is. But it was all that was ever going to be paid. And in fact, there was some negotiating around that to even bring it up to that level. So there was a blanket offer to a lot of families, which I didn't accept. And they came back with a counter offer.
What about your other brothers and sisters?
Yes, my twin brother also got a compensation. And my older brother, I believe, did. But he was dying of cancer in Memphis, and he got a small payout before he passed.
What about your twin brother? How did it affect him? Did he see what you saw?
Look, I think we all had different experiences throughout the foster home. So he had his own share of abuse, and I think being a boy, and my older brothers as well, who were quite protective of us. And of course we were separated too through these foster homes, so we weren't always together. So we all had our own experiences that were very different.
Got to ask, on a lighter note, you've got a twin brother. Was it cool to have a brother that was a twin when you were young, when you were a kid? You always had a mate?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and, to be honest, I think we were each other's rock going through this foster home. I don't think I could have done it without him, to be honest. We leaned on each other so much, and we were there for each other, and he was everything to me during that time, so it would have been incredibly difficult without him.
Are you still close?
Yes, we kind of have our challenges. I don't think he agrees with the fact that I share my story, and I know that I'm doing that because I'm helping so many people. I am helping people to believe in themselves and know that they can overcome any challenge and adversity that they may face in their life, because they see that I've come out the other side and I'm happy and I'm flourishing, and I want to inspire others to believe that they can do the same. So not everyone is on that path, and so that's been a challenge for my family, I think, to see that I'm sharing my story in the media.
Was there a time when you went, I'm through this, when you could really identify with a new Donna as opposed to the old Donna Leigh that had gone through all that trauma?
Yes, absolutely. I really struggled through school, of course, because I also went to 13 schools and I was bullied. I was a target for bullies because I was different. I was traumatised. I probably looked and acted differently. And I never really got to secure any friend networks because I was always moving constantly. So it was really challenging for me in schools, and I did very poorly in school, and I dropped out when I was 16 years old. And it wasn't until I was an adult that I went and did an adult apprenticeship and went back to study school certificate, and I had to do that in order to sit my trade certificate marks. I had to have my school certificate. And I sat my trade certificate, and I was really disciplined and really dedicated. and I won the Apprentice of the Year and Golden Shears Award in New Zealand. And for me, that was just an amazing thing. It was a major breakthrough to be on the stage receiving an award by the Deputy Prime Minister of New Zealand for the Apprentice of the Year in New Zealand. And so that was, I guess, a real pivotal moment in my life where I had this belief in myself that, hey, I can overcome anything. I can get through this and not just survive, but flourish.
What did you learn in your apprenticeship other than the actual on the tools? What did you learn through the study?
I learnt mostly about discipline, to be honest. I learnt about persistence, about, really persevering and putting my heart and soul into studying. And yeah, I think the dedication was really my biggest lesson, and knowing that I've got the intellect, and I'm able to, pass anything.
Did you doubt that? Did
Yes.
you doubt that you had the intellect?
Yes, absolutely, because I failed at school, and I guess I was told, throughout these foster homes that I was hopeless, I was useless, I wasn't loved, nobody cared about me, nobody wanted me.
What's the lasting memory that you have of your mother?
Yeah, she had a great sense of humour, and it was funny. She used to call herself Ellie, and I'd say, because her name was Alison, and I'd say, what do you mean your name's Ellie? And she'd say, oh, my name's Alligator, and she'd take out her false teeth, and she'd just talk with her false teeth, and it was just, she had a really quirky way about her, and she was very kind. She was a nurse, and so she had a real nurturing, kind spirit, and yeah, she was very loving. So I think we shared some pretty happy memories together for those short 7 years that we had.
Is there something that really stands out that you still pull out of your own personal pile of memories that you constantly refer to that might get you through a hard spot, or that you might share with your kids?
Yeah, I think, my mum was very positive, and I know there were times throughout the marriage that she really struggled, and I remember one particular time I was in the back of the car when she was driving to her brother's house very late one night, and I remember her saying to me, quite inappropriately I think for my age, but I remember her saying, I don't think I've got long to live on this planet,
Wow.
And I didn't understand that. I was 6, 7, and I didn't really understand what she meant by that. But she was so happy-go-lucky, and she was so positive, and I never saw her really down or depressed. And I guess that's had an impact on me, because I feel, for me, I've really got this, happy, positive side to me that is quite contagious. And, I hope that I have that impact on my children and, on the community, really. I am very kind of positive, and I've got this energy about me that people love. So, yeah, I think that's probably come from my mum.
Does your mother, though, was she, by putting out that happy-go-lucky persona, was she hiding stuff that she was dealing with?
Yes, she had depression, and she actually had lots of mental health issues. And back in those days, the treatment for mental health and depression was shock treatment. So she actually had shock treatment. And again, we talked about comedians. And
I was going to say that happy-go-lucky mother. Did you marry your mother in a way?
Yeah, maybe. Look, I've never thought of it that way, to be honest. That's an interesting insight, and possibly, yes, that could be the case. I know that there is definitely a connection for me with comedy, and I always had this love for Alan Alda from MASH. I had such a crush on him. I loved his dry, witty sense of humour, and every single day after school I would be watching MASH, and it was something that I really enjoyed. So I think comedy is definitely something that I love, and that positive attitude. And I think every day, we have a choice in life, how we show up in our life, and we can choose how we live, and we can choose, to be sad, or we can choose to be happy. And that's kind of how I like to show up in my life, is what things make me happy, and choosing those things, whether it's gratitude, whether it's walking on the beach, whether it's listening to comedy, whether it's exercise, all those things that help lift my mental health and can help others.
You loved Alan Alda. You loved his wit. You loved his charm. But it's interesting also the Hawkeye Pierce. He had quite a dark side as well. And is that also a relationship that you had with your mother? You could see that dark side of the depression, that then you related to your husband, the comedy you liked?
Look, I'm not sure, to be honest. Look, I was young. I don't know that I could have looked that deep into it. And even with Hawkeye, I don't know that I really saw a lot of the dark side being so young. But when I look at it now, certainly there was a dark side to that whole experience of that set and that series.
Because you were looking at your mother, you're seeing happy-go-lucky mum, but she's dealing with a whole bunch of stuff. Your father, for one thing that she's dealing with. So it's just interesting that the selections that you made that made you happy were reflective of also a dark side.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a synergy there, without a doubt. And yeah, I think, with my mum, there was, she was in a controlling relationship, which had been going on for a long time. And I'm sure that at some point that depression, that sadness must have come out in some aspect of her life that I may have seen. But it's not something I recall or remember now. And I guess I've chosen to remember the good side of her, the good times.
What about your father? What do you remember about him?
It was really interesting when we returned back to the house, and we never spoke about the death of my mum. It was never spoken about. It was just, you'd never mentioned it. And
did you want to?
I was scared. I was afraid of him, and I knew that what he was capable of. So we were walking on eggshells constantly, and you were behaving, just to keep things calm and peaceful. And I guess I didn't know when it would set off, when he would fly off the handle, and he did that often, after he'd been drinking. And so you just kept things really calm and at peace. And so to bring up Mum, it just was unspoken. It was something that he clearly didn't want to speak about, and so we never spoke about it. And when I think about that now, it's such an eerie, strange thing to have that dark energy in the home for so many years, and not to have been able to speak about that.
What did your older brothers want to say, and what did they say behind his back?
They were very protective, and I guess they were always in a high alert. So they were always concerned about our safety, being younger and looking after us, and their own safety. So that was paramount for them. So, they had a lot of hatred for him, but it was like two bad choices. You stay in foster homes where you're being abused, or you go back to somebody that you kind of know, okay, that he's capable of this, but we're together, we're reunited, the siblings are all together. So there was something good that came out of this, and so it's the good and the bad, I guess. So they were protective, they were high alert, and they just managed as best they could, really. And we were taking a lot of drugs. More so my brothers, my older brothers, really heavy duty drugs.
What sort of drugs?
LSD, trippers, pinkies, all kinds of stuff like that, a lot of marijuana on a daily basis, just to numb our pain. We had no support, we had no counselling, so we weren't able to, talk about our trauma. And so, you just buried it. You just numb yourself with whatever. And my father used to buy me bottles of sherry brandy when I was 12 years old, 13 years old, to pretty much justify his own drinking habits, I believe. So, so I had access to alcohol, which my friends thought was just amazing. I had no curfew. I could just hang out on the streets till all hours of the night. I had my own alcohol. I had access to marijuana. We grew it in the backyard. And my father would drink himself to oblivion and be in bed about 7 o'clock at night.
What's the worst thing you got up to at that stage?
Oh, I remember one night I was in the back seat of my brother's Ford, it was a Morris Minor van, with his friends in the front and my girlfriend and I in the back, and we had a hash block and we splashed a psychedelic stick on the inside of this van, and we drove up the Waitakere Ranges, which were these incredibly winding roads. I don't even know how we survived, and it felt like we were like on another planet. We were just tripping out in the back of this Morris Minor and just winding roads going, honestly, I don't know how we survived.
The Donna you are now, if you were to go up to your father, what would you say to him? How would you deal with the whole problem?
Wow, that's an interesting question, one I've never been asked before. I think there would actually be a level of compassion, and it sounds unusual to be saying that, but I know that he had a really tough upbringing, and I know that a lot of his experiences from his childhood reflected on his behaviours and his personality and probably his mental health and how he acted out in his adult life. He had a very dysfunctional childhood, and he had a domineering mother, and I think he had a lack of respect for women. And so all of this played out in his adult life and his relationships. And he was controlling, he was narcissistic, and, I guess he was drinking to avoid the pain that he was suffering too. So on some level, I do have compassion for him. And I do have a level of forgiveness as well, which sounds really odd.
Is that your own personal healing though?
Yes.
Because if you hadn't done that and you went and approached him, is there that level of animosity still?
Yes, and there certainly was when I was younger. So I've done a lot of work there, and, I think it's also about releasing myself of, that pain, and I think forgiving him has helped to free myself, actually.
But can you really forgive someone like that?
Yeah, I think again, it's very liberating when you get to that point where you can, and I think there's always two sides to every story, and I think there was a lot of dysfunction on both sides, and these things can escalate so quickly in a dysfunctional situation, and there was a lot of intense passion, there was a lot of intense stress, and it just came to a point that morning that just blew out of control. And I think it's devastating, it's sad the way it happened, but there were choices that were made all the way along that path to lead to what happened that morning, and both adults are responsible for those choices. And I think it was a bad match. It was a bad match of two people.
When you walked away, when you moved out of home, why did you move out of home? You've gone back to another bad sort of situation from being in a foster home. Why did you finally leave home?
My father drank himself to death when I was 17. He was drinking every single day, and he was on the operating theatre having his second major bypass operation when he died. So I had to support myself, and I had to get a job, and the family home was sold, and I had to get out and, survive and flat and support myself. So there wasn't really any choice.
So how did you turn that around to getting that discipline to win the Golden Shears?
Oh, I went on a journey of lots of, just taking any job I could. And I remember the first job I actually got sacked for. So I turned up to work, and the boss was, he was a chauvinist, really. And I remember that evening going out to the movies and deciding that I wasn't going to go to work the next day, and I rang in sick, and he rang up home, and he spoke to my father, and my father said, "Oh no, she's been fine. She's gone to the movies," and the next day I got the sack. So I had lots of jobs that were just dead end, going nowhere, and I was taking drugs. And it was one night I actually reached out to Lifeline, and I was in a really dark place, and I knew that my life was heading down a really bad path, and I had to get help. And so I reached out to Lifeline, and that sort of started this kind of slow healing for me. I went in and got some face-to-face counselling, and I applied for a apprenticeship in fashion and design at Ambler Shirts, and they put me through trade certificate, and I just was determined. There was just this determination about me. I think because I was paying for this myself, and I was responsible for getting through this and passing. And so there was this whole other level of determination that, I just was not going to let myself down, and I just applied myself.
What about your other brothers? How has it affected them throughout their lives?
Oh, it's been really mixed, They've all gone on their own journeys, and, most often I think they haven't really dealt with the past. I've sort of buried it and pretended that stuff hasn't happened. And I think we all deal with this stuff differently, and I can't judge them for that. We all have our own path, and I think there's been some dysfunction there, but they're not in agreement with me about sharing my story, as I said, so there's been some disconnection within the family, and that's sad that it's turned out that way. My brother in Memphis was very supportive of me sharing my story, and he was behind what I was doing with the Dream Guards and being on the stage and empowering kids to stand up to bullying because of my experience. That was really, I guess that was empowering for me to have somebody in the family supporting me. But he passed away when he was 55 of cancer. So I've sort of been travelling this road alone.
And is it a lonely road, or are you finding that through what you're doing is fulfillment enough?
It's been tough. It's been tough because I have had to stand strong to my values. I've had to stand strong to my purpose and know that I am making a difference. And I've had a lot of people reach out to me, teenagers and adults, that have shared how much my story has impacted on their lives. In fact, teenagers that have said that they were suicidal, and just hearing my story actually shifted their whole mindset. So the fact that that has been the impact, has been enough purpose for me to continue doing what I'm doing. And I look at people like Oprah Winfrey, you know, that has also had to really stand strong to their own values and beliefs, and regardless of whether their family support what they do or not, you know, you have to stand strong and true to who you are, and know that you're here for a purpose.
Were you ever suicidal?
No.
Did you think that you might get to that, so you sought help?
Look, I don't think I've never had suicidal tendencies, but I certainly knew that taking the drugs regularly was not a good way to deal with my pain, and my future wasn't looking positive. You know, I was making lots of bad choices in my life, and it wasn't leading in the way I wanted it to. So I knew that I needed help. I knew that there was a lot of trauma there that I needed to deal with, a lot of pain from my past that I couldn't do on my own. It was a hard thing to do, but it was the best thing I could do, was to reach out and start that kind of process of healing.
I've heard a lot of people say over the time that they've had to work on themselves. What did you do that you really made a difference to yourself, for yourself?
I've tried many, many different therapies over my life, and from counselling to psychology to hypnotherapy, cognitive behavioural therapy. And just recently, actually, following my marriage breakup in January last year, I went and had NLP and timeline therapy. And by far, it's been the most profound shift in my mental health than any other therapy that I've tried. And it was fast and it was profound. And, you know, I learnt about how we all have limiting beliefs in our timeline that, you know, develop our model of the world, how we view the world, how we choose to see from our own perspective. And every day we make choices from that model of the world. And it's phenomenal how that can impact on our everyday life and create patterns that are not serving us.
What's your worst pattern?
My worst pattern is self-sabotage. So I guess not being true to myself and compromising who I am for the sake of being with somebody else, and probably attracting a narcissistic type of partner into my life, which has been, you know, of course, my role model of my father, probably more than anything.
With the breakdown of the marriage that you had last year, how's that left you feeling then, that you've repeated those patterns again and then you're still looking to move forward, or has the NLP got you through it?
The NLP helped immensely. I actually have completely transformed, and it's incredible actually. The changes I've seen in myself in the last 14 months has been phenomenal. My mindset is completely different. I am more assertive. I don't allow people's opinions to matter so much in my life anymore. I have a different perspective on life. It's been phenomenal. It's been incredible.
Talk us through the NLP process then.
The NLP process, so it's all about understanding, you know, that we all have limiting beliefs that are set in our timeline, and some of these limiting beliefs are even prior to our birth. So they can be genetic, they can be from, you know, previous lives. And so when we have an experience in our life, we develop a belief system from that experience. So for instance, for me, growing up, one of my beliefs was I was told that my twin brother was incredibly creative and artistic, and you're not so creative. You're not really artistic, Donna. You are more business-like, you have a business mind, and you will be a businesswoman. So all through my life, I believed that I wasn't creative.
But the Golden Shears Award, it should have reinforced your belief that you're creative.
Yes, but I guess the Golden Shears Award was more, it's drafting, it's pattern making, and so there's not a lot of creativity around that. It's more mathematical, actually. So it's all about formulas and measuring and creating patterns. So there's not a lot of room for creativity as such. So I had this belief, one of many, about myself, and these are set in your timeline throughout your life. And if you're not aware of these beliefs, that you're not good enough, or that you're not worthy enough, or that you're not loved, or whatever it may be, whatever these beliefs may be, affect your choices in life and how you show up in your life. And they have a profound impact on how you view the world and the choices you make every day.
When your father passed away, was it a relief?
Yes, there was a relief. It was mixed. There was a relief that, I guess, the fear of him being around, there was always a fear. So there was a relief of not being in fear so much. But there was also sadness. There was sadness about the loss of the hope of a father that I wished I had. You know, the grieving of a father I wished I had. I guess it's a bit like a marriage, you know. When you grieve the loss of a marriage, it's the grief of what you wished you had, or the future. It's, you know, you're grieving the future of that. And so I guess it was mixed. It was a mixed feeling.
You talk about your brothers not liking you to share your story publicly. How do you feel about everyone knowing your deepest, darkest secrets?
I think people are inspired by stories of true trauma to triumph. And I believe that what I really want, the final message I want people to be left with, is that no matter what darkness you face in your life, you can come out the other side flourishing. And I believe that I'm an example of that. I'm an example of that because I am walking the talk, and I put my health and nutrition as a priority in my life, and I encourage others to do the same. I talk about the natural ways that we can improve our mental health: vitamin D, sunshine, you know, laughter, hugs, socialization, creativity. You know, there's so many ways that we can improve our mental health, and, you know, I implement those into my life every day. Gratitude is a phenomenal way we can improve our mental health. And, you know, creating the amazing Global Gratitude Chain project has been, you know, an incredible way to connect the world and demonstrate that gratitude is one way we can all put this into our daily rituals.
That Global Gratitude Chain, tell us all about that.
It started when we were doing a Dream Guards showcase to the community. And the Dream Guards, it was a show that my husband and I did together, and we went into schools. It was a high energy interactive show teaching kids about standing up to bullying and abuse in their life. And the showcase was demonstrating to the community, you know, the show, so that hopefully some of the schools would come on board and we may get some government funding. And during the showcase, we had some project tables. And one of the project tables was a gratitude table. And they were little links of paper where people would come to the table and write down what they are grateful for in their life. And one of the girls that was on this table was a 14-year-old girl. Now, her family had reached out to me 12 months previously because their daughter was being bullied for 9 months in year 9, and she was suicidal. And they reached out to me late on a Saturday evening asking if I could come and chat with their daughter. And I called in the next morning and I bought some resources, some affirmations and some books. And I sat down and I spoke to the daughter, and I also spoke to the family, and I shared my story. After sharing my story, this 14-year-old girl came up to me and she hugged me with tears in her eyes, and she said, if you can overcome what you've overcome, I can get through what I'm going through. And within 3 weeks, she volunteered at this showcase event, and she was on this table, this gratitude table. And after a number of links were written, she started creating this little chain, like if you can imagine one of those Christmas chains that we made when we were kids. And that was the start of the Global Gratitude Chain movement. And now we are receiving gratitude links from all over the world, from Hong Kong, from Germany, from Ireland, from America, from Singapore, India, everywhere. And this global gratitude chain is all about connecting the world through a mindful moment of gratitude.
What are some of the ones that stand out to you?
Well, there's been some significant ones, but I'll share 3. So one is from a inspirational speaker that shared how she was grateful that she escaped the Bosnian War with her family and survived. There was another one that was a professor that said that he was grateful that he survived 3 suicide attempts. And the last one I really love, it was from a 4-year-old little boy, and he said that he was grateful for his robot dinosaur. So, the shares are just beautiful, and some are very profound. There's a lot of domestic violence shares. So just amazing.
What did you write in yours?
I wrote that I was grateful for my resilience that I've developed and the life lessons that I've learnt through, all of my experiences in life, and that I'm grateful that I have 2 beautiful children in my life that are, balanced and healthy.
Did they suffer bullying?
Yes.
How did you help them through what you've done and what you're doing?
My daughter actually suffered badly in Year 9, which is statistically one of the worst years for girls to be bullied. And she was being bullied by a close friend of hers, and they all sort of ganged up on her. And I went for the tough love, to be honest. I took away all of her social media because most of the bullying was happening via online. And this is what happens mostly with girls. And I said, look, the best thing right now is that you don't have the social media. You're not exposed to this, this toxic abuse.
What was her reaction, though, the tough love?
She wasn't happy at first. She really struggled with it. She also saw a psychologist, which helped her like on a weekly basis with some tangible tools that helped her in the playground when she had to face these bullies, and that was amazing. But the incredible thing about the social media is she adapted so quickly. Within a matter of a month, I said to her, "How are you going with this? Not having Snapchat, not having Facebook and Instagram," and she said to me, "Actually, Mum, I'm not missing it," and I think what she was really expressing is she wasn't missing the abuse. And she went without that for 9 months. And at the end of that, I was the one saying, well, so do you want some of your social media back? She said, I'm not really sure, Mum. I might just try with Instagram because it's a gentle kind of platform. And it was phenomenal, actually. It was really incredible. And the bully, the main perpetrator, actually came back and apologised for her abuse.
Why?
She changed schools, and I think she had an experience where she may have felt isolated, where she was trying to, make new friends, and she probably felt alone, and she may have felt what my daughter had felt, being isolated and being disconnected from the group and being bullied. So she probably had her own experience and felt some form of empathy and reached out to Jess, and it was amazing.
Did she forgive her?
Yes. She did.
How did that feel for you, seeing your daughter work through something like that?
Oh, I was so proud, incredibly proud.
When you had kids, because of what you'd gone through, because of the way your father acted, did you keep an eye on your husband because of it?
No, I didn't see that my husband had the same traits as my father at all. I do remember this relief that was just like this weight lifted off me when my daughter turned 8, when she got past 7. It was profound. And it was just, related to my own life as a 7-year-old and what I suffered. And there was just this really, wow, she's got past that age. And she's healthy and she's doing well.
What did your kids think when they were able to understand your story and what you'd been through?
I didn't share with my children till they were 11 and 12, and they were blown away. They were blown away. They really had no idea, and they were, I don't know, they just shocked, I guess is the word. They could never see that in me because I'm positive and happy, and they've seen a person that's, I guess is overcome that stuff and is helping others. I think they were inspired that I was using my experiences and my childhood to help others. I think that's been really inspiring to them.
So when did you get into the speaking circuit and make that decision to share your story and start talking to others?
When I shared my story with my husband, and it took me a while to share it because I'd only really shared my story with about 4 or 5 people. And the reason why is because I found that when I shared my story, I almost felt like their reaction to my story, it was quite traumatizing at times because they were so shocked at what I had been through. It was like reliving it in a way, on some level anyway. It's a strange feeling, but so I sort of held back from sharing my story and I didn't share it with many. So when I shared it with my husband, he said, "Oh, you are an example of a person that can overcome anything and not just, get through it, but be just so happy and flourishing, and you can help so many people to get through their own adversity. So have you thought about sharing your story, in our show?" And so that sort of evolved from a show that was about health and nutrition and magic and balloons and happy-go-lucky to a much more profound show about life lessons and about tools that we were teaching kids to.
What was your husband's reaction, other than the obvious, when he found out what you'd gone through?
He was completely blown away. He could not believe that I had been through what I'd been through, and here I am, this person that's just, bubbly, vibrant, happy and positive, and there wasn't a synergy. He couldn't see how I could have gone through that and be this person.
You are a motivational speaker these days, and are you back on the circuit now because of the restrictions because of COVID?
My first speaking gig was in November in Gladstone, and it was to a group of domestic violence survivors, women, and that was incredibly inspiring. These were women that had been through all kinds of abusive relationships and backgrounds, even with abusive mothers, and they went through this incredibly empowering course where they learnt about sharing their story and about just stepping into their own self-love, and they had lessons in deportment, they had lessons in makeup and hair, and they chose a beautiful outfit that they could then walk on the catwalk, and their story was shared in front of their family and friends. And the confidence in these women within 3 days from coming into this studio, this course, and being really reluctant about sharing their story and being so vulnerable, to being this confident, woman that was walking on this catwalk and being so empowered in front of their family and friends. It was an incredible transformation.
They're learning from you, but what do you learn from them?
My story is echoed in their lives, and that every single person can tap into their own resilience that's within them and overcome anything everything that they have suffered and flourish. And these women were examples of that. And I just was so inspired to see that again and again in these women from all different backgrounds and races and religions.
You've been through some pretty horrific experiences. In your dealing with other people that have had them as well, have any really stood out that shocked you? Because not much should shock you from what you've been through.
Yes, there was one story of a woman that her mother had prostituted her as a 10-year-old for a number of years, and this woman, has all sorts of problems with intimacy in her relationships and moving forward now, and it's affected her. And for me, that was incredibly traumatic to hear that. It was devastating to hear that a mother could do that to her own child. That really moved me. That touched my heart a lot.
How did you help her?
I think in sharing my story on that day, she was one of these women, and sharing my story, she spoke to me after, and she was moved by the fact that she'd forgiven her mum, and there was this synergy that she'd experienced adversity and she was overcoming that, and through this course she felt like she was flourishing, and so she saw a connection there, and I think she was inspired by it.
Do you need to have gone through what you've gone through to share a story and message of positivity and resilience?
Definitely not. There are so many stories that people experience every single day. I mean, stories that we are seeing so common at the moment with COVID, people that have lost their jobs and have reinvented themselves, have pivoted back to a career that they may have had in their past, or, started a job that their own business because of COVID, because people have lost their security. They are choosing to step out of their comfort zone and maybe start a new business that they may have always wanted to, but have been fearful of doing that. And I think having that time to reflect and think about what's really important in their life and having a purpose has helped them to kind of step into their power in a way and take that risk.
Sort of like a COVID silver lining.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is a silver lining to this. And I know for myself, I pivoted back to my personal training, and it's been so inspiring to help others that have just recently, over the last 12 months or so, really been in dark places because of their own experiences through COVID. And I've been able to help them with life coaching, with my personal training, and even the nutrition to live a better life, live a happier life. And it's nice to see them transforming.
Why did you become a personal trainer in the first place?
That's interesting, My passion was around helping children actually curb childhood obesity, because children, we were seeing genetic obesity, and children are born with more fat cells, and so we're seeing this obesity in newborn children. And I wanted to educate them about eating healthier, making healthier choices, and exercising, and that exercise can be fun. And so that was all part of the Dream Guard show, was to make the exercises, the workouts fun.
The Dream Guard show, what happens?
Well, it's an interactive high energy show, and it's magic, it's balloon artistry, but it's about empowering kids to believe in their own magic within them, and tapping into their own resilience and knowing that they actually do have the tools within them. And also, being there for each other. And this show was all around my peace tools. My peace tools came to me in a meditation, actually. I went into a meditation with this intention to come up with some tools that represented the universal sign for stop, which is hand up high in the air, 5 fingers. And I wanted to come out of this meditation with an acronym that would be simple for children to understand. And I came out of this meditation with my peace tools. And these peace tools have transformed and saved lives.
So could you just expand?
Yes, so the peace tools, so they start with the letter P, and the letter P stands for protect yourself and be powerful. And it's about standing tall with your shoulders back and your head held high. And it's statistically proven that you're less likely to be bullied or abused because you're showing yourself to be confident. And the E in peace stands for escape the situation. And it's all about walking away, running away if somebody's trying to abuse you. Don't allow other people to, to abuse you in your life. So, and then the A stands for armor, and it's about using your powerful tool, your imagination, to build an imaginary armor around your body so other people's opinions don't matter in your world. And I talk about the lion doesn't lose sleep over the opinions of sheep, so be the lion. And then the C in peace is creating strong friendships in your community of like-minded people that show you compassion and kindness and have your back. And then the E is express your emotions, and it's about reaching out for the help and support you need if you're being bullied or abused. And it's about being the upstander in your community and helping and high-fiving people that, need your help. And, that's really important, I think, because a lot of people that are being bullied feel isolated and alone. So reaching out for the help. And so we supported Paradise Kids and Kids Helpline in our shows. And so we gave out a lot of material to the children so that they could have the phone numbers available to be able to call those services if they needed them.
What was the reaction that you saw from the kids?
Oh, they loved the concept, and we created an ambassador program, a Dream Guard ambassador program, where the school, the students would nominate an ambassador for the school, and this ambassador would uphold the peace tools in the school community, and the students would know that student would be a person to go to if they needed help or support, if they were being picked on or bullied.
It's a big part of your life, this bullying. What do you still want to achieve in that sphere and in other spheres in your life?
I still see myself speaking. That's really my passion. And so coming out of COVID, I hope that I'm going to be on more stages. And so that's really important to me. I've also created an app, which is a free life-saving app. And we've had something like 1,800 downloads on that app. So that app has 13 life-saving support services, including Lifeline, Kids Helpline, Paradise Kids, Headspace, eSafety Commissioner. So a lot of platforms for people, kids that are being bullied, as well as adults. There's a DV 1-800 support line for domestic violence. And, you just tap on any one of those support services and you go straight to their website where you can get further resources and reach out.
We don't tend to think of adults being bullied so much these days. Is it a big thing?
Yes, it's a huge problem in the corporate field, absolutely. And, sadly, it's a huge problem for people, and it affects their productivity, it affects their performance, it affects their mental health.
What about your mental health, dealing with all of this stuff on a continual basis? Does it get you down? Do you constantly need to keep yourself revved up?
I have a great support network myself if I need to debrief. I have professionals that I can go to chat with, and I understand that's really important if needed. And, I always believe that working on yourself and your mental health is an investment in you. But generally, I feel that I'm able to deal with things on a level where I don't allow them to trigger me. And I know my triggers. I understand where my triggers are. So I tend to be able to deal with that pretty well.
Your app, how do people find out about it if they want to download it and check it out? How do they do that?
Yeah, so it's just through the App Store, and it's the Dream Guards, and it's a free app So you can download that, and also through my books, The Adventures of Jessie and Rocky Rockstar. So the QR code is in the back of those books. So when you purchase those books, you can download the app.
You want to grab the book and just show that camera over there, and we'll have a look where it actually is.
So there's a QR code.
That one over there.
Yep. It's a QR code right there, and you just hold your phone over it like we do in the restaurants nowadays when we are signing in for COVID, and you download the app. And on the app, not only is 13 life-saving support services, but also we have meditations and positive mindset videos.
How important is it to meditate in this day and age with COVID and all of the things that we're having to deal with in this fast-paced society?
Well, I think it's a great tool to put into your daily rituals. Is meditation. You know, it's self-love, and it's finding peace, inner peace, and I think it's an important part of our everyday.
When do you expect to get back to full-time speaking and going overseas and doing all of that sort of thing? Do you have a forecast of when you expect it to start coming to fruition again?
Look, that's a tough call. It's a tough question. I wish I had a crystal ball with that. I am going to start being very proactive with sharing my books and my author journey through libraries and that kind of thing. And I have a couple of small speaking gigs coming up, but internationally, I think that's a fair way off, to be honest. Yeah, I'm not in a big hurry to be going overseas at this stage. I'm happy to be staying within Australia.
Where do you want to target, though, if you're to start doing some small stuff? Where are you going to target, where you're going to speak, and where you're going to go?
Mostly domestic violence events, so empowering people, to recognise the red flags. You
talk about red flags.
Yeah.
What are the biggest red flags people have got to look out for?
Gaslighting. Gaslighting's a big one.
So tell us about gaslighting. What's it all about?
So gaslighting is where you may be feeling really uncomfortable because your partner has belittled you in some way. Maybe it's a situation where you have responded to something they've said and they turn that over back onto you. For instance, they may say, you're oversensitive. You have overreacted to the situation. But in fact, the way that they are behaving and the way that they are putting you down, the way that they are, they may be, abusive toward you, and they are choosing to turn it back onto you. So it's you start to question whether it in fact is yourself that's got the issue, and whether you are seeing it clearly or not. So it's creating this self-doubt within you about your own values, and that's gaslighting.
If you could change one thing about your life, what would it be?
Gosh, I see all of my experiences in my life as a blessing now, to be honest. The good and the bad, the suffering and, the happy times, because I really believe that every part of my life is a lesson, and it's happened to me for a reason, and I'm not regretful about any of it. I feel so grateful for my life, and no matter what, no matter how hard it's been, no matter, I'm grateful for all of it. So I don't have any aspect of my life that I have any regret for. I wish it was different.
What's the overlying theme then that you try and get across to people with all of your shows and your books and all of the public demonstrations that you do? What's the overlying theme that you try and get across?
That we all have resilience within us, and we all have the ability to overcome any challenge and adversity, and that there is gifts in suffering if we can choose to see it that way, and that if we can embrace the life lessons that all our experiences teach us, then we can come out the other side flourishing and able to inspire others to do the same. And, I believe that we all are in a position to live our best life, and if we choose to do that.
Well, it's an absolute gift having you here in the studio, and Donna Leigh Perfect, thanks for joining us over the bonnet.
Thank you very much, Mark. Appreciate it.